The Illuminati, a name that drifts through the corridors of history like a ghost in the mist, familiar yet distant. Tonight, as the world grows quiet and your breath slows into rhythm with the night, we begin our journey into the shadows, tracing the nearly invisible footsteps of a secret society that, some say, never truly disappeared. They were real, and they were born not in myth, but in a place, a time, and under a purpose. Shrouded in silence but undeniable, it began in Bavaria. The year was 1776, and the world was already shifting. Great powers were rising, revolutions stirring in the hearts of men. But beneath the noise, in a place of soft candlelight and whispered ideals, a quiet revolution was unfolding, not one of swords or blood, but of thought, of secrecy, and of hidden design. A man named Adam Weishaupt, a professor of law at the University of Ingolstadt, looked upon the world and saw a landscape of control, of corruption cloaked in tradition. He dreamed not of thrones or wealth, but of liberation, of a system that could subtly reshape the minds of those who shaped the world. And so, under cover of night, he formed a society. He called it the Orden der Perfektibilisten, the Order of Perfectibility. But soon it would become known by another name, a name that would echo across centuries, the Illuminati. Imagine the stillness of a Bavarian night, narrow cobblestone alleys bathed in moonlight, the chill of spring in the air. In an upper room above a quiet street, a group of men gather, their voices low, their movements deliberate. The door creaks softly closed behind them, and the world outside fades. Inside they speak of ideas too dangerous for daylight. Reason, science, liberty, whispered words in a world ruled by monarchs and priests. They light candles, the wax dripping like time itself, and they make oaths not of loyalty to king or country, but to one another and to a future that has yet to be written. There are no grand robes, no thunderclaps or daggers drawn, just minds, curious, rebellious, idealistic. They see themselves as the bearers of a flame, not of fire, but of knowledge. They believe that through education, enlightenment, and quiet influence, they can guide humanity towards something purer, freer, more just. They do not plan to rule, not in the open. Instead, they will influence the rulers. They will be the candle behind the throne, the whisper in the ear, the unseen architect of change. And so it begins. A slow ripple moving outward, hidden beneath the surface of history. Members of the Illuminati begin to infiltrate other organizations. Freemason lodges, with their own rich histories and ancient symbols, offer perfect cover. Through careful selection and coded communication, Weishaupt's ideas spread like a soft current beneath the stormy seas of Europe's political turmoil. To those on the outside, the Illuminati were nothing but a rumor, a name without form, but to those within it was something else entirely. A calling, a responsibility, a quiet purpose carried forward with patience and discretion. They adopted pseudonyms drawn from antiquity. Weishaupt himself became Spartacus, evoking the rebel spirit of the Roman slave who once defied an empire. They believed they were doing the same, defying an empire of ignorance, of superstition, of control. Their structure was subtle, their hierarchy precise. There were initiates, novices, minervals, levels of enlightenment revealed only as trust was earned. The deeper one went, the more one was trusted to carry the message, to guide others. Their teachings were passed in coded language, their meetings carefully planned, scattered, hard to trace. Even now, the full extent of their early reach is uncertain, like a fog that refuses to lift, revealing only silhouettes, of what might have been. But something about them, something has remained. Their story did not end when the Bavarian authorities banned the group in 1785. That much is clear, for even as their documents were seized and their members exposed, the myth only grew stronger. Pieces of their philosophy found new homes in other lodges, in revolutionary circles, in governments and institutions. It is said that their spirit moved quietly into the bloodstream of history, no longer confined to a single name, but scattered like ash in the wind, unseen but everywhere. And here, in the quiet of this moment, with the world at rest and time stretched thin, you can feel it too, can't you? The soft hum of mystery, the gentle suggestion that somewhere just beyond reach, something secret remains, that a thought whispered 2 centuries ago might still echo in the corridors of power today, not as command, not as prophecy, but as influence, as suggestion. As you lie there with your eyes growing heavy and the weight of the day fading from your mind, imagine those first moments. A candle flickering in a quiet room, a circle of thinkers leaning in, sharing ideas not yet safe to speak aloud. Their words ripple out, carried on the winds of change, through revolutions, through wars, through borders drawn and redrawn. And as you listen, their story begins to breathe again, soft and slow, like the turning of a page beneath sleeping fingers. The Illuminati were real. They walked beneath the same stars as you, and though their names may be forgotten, their quiet rebellion continues to whisper, not in shouts or slogans, but in the silent corners of the world where secrets wait to be found and truth still wears a cloak of shadow. And so the candlelight of the Illuminati flickered into the folds of history, never quite extinguished, only hidden like a glowing ember beneath ash. Yet as their whispers travelled through corridors unseen, they brushed against something older, something vast and intricate, a network of rituals and symbols that had already wound itself into the very bones of Europe. The Freemasons. Even before Weishaupt's quiet revolution, the Freemasons had built their temples, not of stone alone, but of mystery, of fellowship, of layered meaning. Their origins are murky, like a mirror reflecting back into a fog. Some say they began as humble stonemasons, guilds of skilled craftsmen working on cathedrals under vaulted heavens. Others believe something older pulses at their roots. A torch passed from ancient builders, perhaps even from the temples of Solomon, whose very stones were said to hum with divine proportion. What is known is that by the time the Illuminati emerged, the Freemasons had already evolved. No longer just artisans, they had become thinkers, seekers, men drawn not only to geometry and architecture, but to ideas, to brotherhood, to balance, to the secrets that hide in plain sight. Their lodges spread like a network of hidden stars across Europe. To the outside world, they were social clubs, but within there were signs, passwords, and degrees of initiation, a structure built to test the mind, and perhaps to protect the deeper truths passed in silence. It was here, into this world of quiet handshakes and sacred compasses, that the Illuminati crept, not with violence, but with precision. Weishaupt understood that if you wished to stir the still waters of power, you had to start where the current already ran. Many Freemason lodges welcomed him, not knowing at first the depth of the ideas he brought with him. But slowly, over time, like ink spilled into clear water, the philosophies began to merge. Members who once gathered simply to speak of ethics and fellowship began to explore new, more radical thoughts. whispers of equality, reason, even rebellion. Imagine now a meeting in one of those dimly lit lodges, perhaps in Vienna or Lyon or Prague. The hour is late, the city silent beyond the heavy curtains. Within, a ring of men sits beneath a dome of stars painted across the ceiling. There is incense, faintly sweet. A gavel taps once, gently, and then, in voices low and careful, they speak not of kings and crowns, but of the soul, of the universe, of a world where truth is layered and only those who seek may find. They draw symbols on parchment, the square and compass, the all-seeing eye, the pillars that guard a sacred threshold. These are not idle marks. They are keys, each opening a door to something larger. The Freemasons understood that the world could be read like a book if one only knew the language. And now, alongside that ancient grammar, came the Illuminati. A new script, a new voice hidden between the lines. Some resisted, of course. Not all Freemasons welcomed this quiet incursion. There were rifts, debates, lodges divided, but others embraced the mystery. They saw in Weishaupt's vision a mirror to their own, a chance to turn philosophy into influence and influence into transformation. In their minds, they were not conspiring. They were correcting. Quietly, softly, like a gardener pruning a hidden tree. Outside, the world continued unaware. Empires shifted, borders changed. But beneath it all, these hidden alliances grew roots. Letters passed hand to hand, symbols etched into the margins of books, a word spoken at just the right time in just the right ear. This was not domination. This was suggestion, a steering of the current rather than a storm. And perhaps that's why their legend endured, because nothing leaves a deeper mark than what's never quite seen. A statue in a square, a painting in a chapel, a line in a speech, all might carry the subtle touch of a brother who once sat in that circle, who once took an oath not to destroy but to guide, or perhaps to conceal. The idea of a shadow network sounds dark, threatening, but here in the quiet of night, let us think of it differently. Think of it as an underground river, not evil, not good, but persistent. A hidden stream flowing beneath the stones of history, carrying knowledge, carrying ambition, and yes, sometimes carrying danger. It is easy from the comfort of our time to imagine these societies as something separate from us, relics of another age, cloaked in candle smoke and Latin phrases. But what if they were not so distant? What if the hand that designed the layout of a capital city, or the eye that chose the emblem on a nation's seal, once held those same symbols in a quiet lodge centuries ago? This is not to say that everything is part of a plan, only that perhaps from time to time there was a plan, crafted not in war rooms but in silence, shaped not with swords but with ideas, with symbols, with alignment. And so as the firelight dances gently on the stone walls of another long-forgotten temple, we are left to wonder. How many alliances were formed in silence? How many decisions shaped not by vote but by glance, a raised eyebrow, a shared phrase, a gesture known only to those who understood? Perhaps the most haunting part of it all is this, that the truth may not be buried. It may simply be hidden in plain sight, in monuments, in numbers, in the quiet traditions we walk past every day, never knowing they were once whispers passed in candlelit rooms. Let the thought drift with you now, like smoke curling toward the ceiling. Let your breath slow. Feel the soft hum of history beneath your skin, as though the walls themselves remember. And know this, we have only just stepped through the doorway. Beyond it lies a corridor of shadows and symbols where every step takes us deeper, not into fear, but into wonder, into what might be, into what may have always been. And if those whispers etched into stone and parchment still echo in the silence, perhaps it is because their language was never meant to fade. The alliances that took root in lodges and dim-lit studies did not speak in common tongue. They spoke in symbols, and those symbols, simple at first glance, carry within them the weight of entire philosophies. A triangle, a spiral, a circle intersected by a square, each one a world in itself, a riddle suspended in time. These were not merely drawings, but they were incantations of thought, silent words passed between those who knew how to listen without ears, how to read without letters. There is a kind of magic, soft and structured, in the way the elite have used geometry as both blueprint and veil. Sacred geometry, they called it, as though the universe itself had been built according to secret mathematical laws, and by learning them, one could draw closer to the mind of the divine. Picture a temple built not for worship, but for resonance. The placement of each stone precise, not for beauty, but for vibration, for harmony, so that when you stood at its heart, the space would hum softly around you as if the air remembered something you had forgotten. Pythagoras, the mystic mathematician, believed that numbers were not merely quantities, but living truths, spirits even. To him, the triangle was not just three sides, but a holy trinity of mind, body, and spirit. The circle was eternal, without beginning or end. The square was order, foundation, the earth beneath our feet. These shapes were used not because they were useful, but because they held meaning. And those meanings became keys, and to unlock not just buildings or codes, but minds. As the centuries passed, those who walked in these quiet traditions found ways to hide in plain sight. The compass and square. Simple tools, yes, but also messages. The eye inside the pyramid. An ancient gaze that sees without judging, watches without sleeping. You can still find it on the dollar bill, framed in Latin and mystery. Annuit coeptis, novus ordo seclorum. Words that feel like echoes, whispers frozen in ink. In the great cathedrals of Europe, symmetry reigns. Arches mirror one another, spires climb skyward like prayers carved into stone. It is not only beauty, it is message. Hidden ratios speak to those who know where to look. The golden, mean Fibonacci spirals. Nature's fingerprint stamped onto civilization's canvas. These are not accidents. They are choices, intentions passed from hand to hand, from architect to initiate, from silent meeting to enduring monument. And yet this language was never loud. It was never meant to shout. It was meant to feel like a shiver down the spine when you step into a room and sense something deeper than the walls. Like a pattern your eyes can't name, but your soul somehow recognizes. You may pass beneath a carved keystone in an old doorway and never realize that you've stepped through a threshold older than time. An initiation of sorts, unwitting but real. Think too of codes, of books bound in leather, their margins marked with faint glyphs and spirals, of paintings where a hand rests just so, a finger pointing not to the obvious, but to the clue, of floor mosaics in government buildings, labyrinths hidden beneath the shuffle of 1,000 footsteps. These are not just decorations, they are reminders, remnants of an older way of seeing, a time when the world was read like a poem, not a ledger. Even music was part of it. Certain tones, certain harmonies used in rituals to guide the spirit, to quiet the noise of the outer world and awaken the inner one. Bells tuned to sacred frequencies, chants that echo through domes designed not just for acoustics, but for transcendence. a symphony not for the ears but for the soul. And it begs the question, were these symbols and codes merely aesthetic, or were they meant to awaken something, to gently nudge the mind open, to create a kind of resonance between the visible and the invisible? Could it be that some truths cannot be spoken, only felt through form and pattern? Consider how these shapes recur across cultures, across centuries, the spiral carved into Celtic stone, the lotus unfolding in Eastern mandalas, the Star of David, the Eye of Horus, the Ouroboros, always circling, always returning, the same themes again and again, as if humanity, scattered though it may be, continues to remember something old, something deep, something that cannot be forgotten because it is part of us. And so, when those secret societies used these symbols, when the Illuminati slipped them into architecture, into rituals, into charters and correspondence, it was not random. It was a call, a quiet call to those who might see, not to dominate the world, but to understand it, or at least to preserve the belief that understanding is still possible, that truth, like a star, still glows behind the curtain of clouds. Let this thought rest with you now. Let it settle like dust in the light of an ancient window. You are not being asked to believe in conspiracy, only to wonder, to feel in the soft curve of a spiral or the hidden geometry of a building's face, that maybe, just maybe, there is a conversation still happening between the world we see and the one we've forgotten how to hear. And as you breathe, slow and steady, know that this story, this journey through shadows, is not about answers. It is about invitations to walk a little slower, to look a little closer, to listen a little longer in the quiet spaces where symbols still speak. And silence is more than absence. It is language. And so the symbols linger, etched in silence, waiting to be seen. But behind them something deeper stirs. A presence not confined to parchment or marble, but woven into the rise and fall of empires themselves. If you listen carefully, as the night drapes the world in hush and memory, you may sense it. That curious rhythm beneath the surface of history. A quiet breath exhaled through crowns and conquests, through revolutions and reformations. Something old and yet never named. Imagine the empires, not as thunderous juggernauts of power, but as vast tapestries, delicate, detailed, every thread tugged gently by hands not always visible. Rome, that eternal whisper of civilization, marched not just with legions, but with ideas, with sacred flames and hidden rites passed from temple to council hall. Among the marble and might, there were murmurs of mystery cults, initiation chambers beneath the surface, and senators who carried more than political ambition. They bore allegiances to older truths. The Vestals kept their fires, but who taught them to keep silence too? And then there was Constantinople, Byzantium's golden heart, where faith and secrecy walked hand in hand. Behind its gilded icons and heavenly mosaics, esoteric knowledge flowed quietly through monks and mystics. Secretive guilds copied ancient texts by candlelight, not just scriptures but scrolls of geometry, alchemy, astronomy. Some were copies of copies, their origins lost in the mists of Alexandria's ruins, preserved not for kings but for the initiated. The knowledge survived, not because it was useful but because it was sacred, hidden, protected, perhaps even guarded. As the centuries drifted onward, those echoes found new chambers in which to resonate. The Renaissance blossomed like a revelation, but some say it bloomed too suddenly, as if guided, as if whispered into motion. Of financiers, painters, and philosophers alike appeared to awaken at once, many drawn from mysterious fraternities that met behind locked doors and candlelit altars. Their influence was subtle, like wind in a curtain, a breath that changed the shape of everything without ever being seen. In Florence, beneath the laughter of Medici banquets, strange conversations unfolded in shadows. Men debated the music of the spheres and the architecture of heaven, and some wore rings bearing symbols whose meanings were never spoken aloud. It wasn't just beauty they sought, it was connection to the divine pattern, the forgotten harmony, the language behind the veil. Even as the New World was discovered, old influences travelled across the oceans. The founding of nations, you see, is never entirely straightforward. There are always hands beneath the surface, steering the rudder with barely a touch. When the United States began to stir into being, more than musket fire and ink shaped its birth. Many of its architects, men of law, of vision, of liberty, had also walked through the hush of lodge rooms, through ancient rites inherited from distant lands. Washington himself, robed in solemn garb, once laid the cornerstone of the Capitol with Masonic ceremony, a ritual not just for spectacle, but for consecration, as if to suggest the nation would rise not only on laws and labor, but on something unseen, a foundation more spiritual than political. And there, in the currency, in the architecture, in the mottos, echoes linger. The eye that watches, the pyramid that endures, the unfinished work eternally in progress. And as empire shifted again from colonial rule to industrial might, from steam to steel to circuitry, the influence adapted. It didn't disappear. It evolved. Secret societies no longer whispered in candlelight. They passed messages through print, through coded correspondence, through invitation-only salons that discussed the future while sipping brandy beside velvet drapes. Some created think tanks, others quietly backed inventions and philosophies. They were not monolithic nor always aligned, but they shared something deeper, a knowing, a sense that there is more to history than chance and chaos. And yet, if these groups held such sway, why hide? Why not rule openly? Because power, the truest kind, rarely seeks the throne. It listens from behind it. It guides gently. It does not declare itself with fanfare, but instead embeds itself like roots in soil, out of sight, but essential. A quiet influence, a presence that leaves fingerprints, never signatures. And so the question becomes not whether they shaped history, but how deeply and how often and why. What did they seek? Control or understanding, protection or purpose? Were they guarding truths too fragile for open air, or preserving myths that held the world together? You may never find the answers in textbooks or timelines, but sometimes you feel them in moments of great turning, revolutions, collapses, renaissances, when the world seemed to shift on invisible hinges. It is in these moments that the echoes grow loudest, in the long corridors of Versailles, in the ash of burned manuscripts, in the silent hands that exchanged glances across parliaments and palaces, knowing more than they ever said aloud. And tonight, as you drift deeper into this tale, let your thoughts linger in those shadows between fact and wonder. Let yourself imagine a world gently steered, not by tyrants or chance, but by quiet intention, by minds who saw the world not as it is, but as it could be. Minds who planted symbols like seeds, built temples from starlight and stone, and whispered to one another in a language that was never written down. The winds of empire rise and fall, flags change, borders shift, but the quiet ones, the secret ones, they remain, watching, waiting, weaving their unseen threads into the very fabric of time. And perhaps even now, their voices still hum beneath the surface, in the spaces between headlines, in the silence after speeches, in the pauses that follow progress. Breathe softly and listen, not with your ears, but with the part of you that remembers stories not told, but felt. You are closer now, closer than you think. As the night deepens, there is a peculiar stillness that settles over the world, almost as if it too is listening, waiting for something, a secret perhaps that has yet to be whispered into the dark. The past with its shadows and mysteries seems close enough to touch, yet it drifts away like smoke on a breeze. The symbols, the societies, the whispered rituals of those who came before, they linger, but have they truly gone? Or do they remain, hidden behind the veil of the modern world, as silent and powerful as ever? In the bustle of today's world, it may be tempting to think of secret societies as relics of the past, things that belonged to another time, to the days of kings and hidden scrolls, when power was written in ink and sealed with a waxen mark. But pause for a moment and ask yourself, in a world so complex, so interconnected, so fast-moving, might there still be hands that guide the course of events from behind the scenes, their influence as invisible as the currents beneath the surface of the sea? What if the power of these societies never truly dissipated, but instead transformed, slipping into the very fabric of the modern world? What if, rather than gathering in candlelit chambers, their members now sit in gleaming boardrooms or in the halls of government, exchanging not cryptic words but subtle gestures, unspoken understandings? What if the symbols are no longer carved in stone but hidden in plain sight, woven into the architecture of our cities, the logos of our corporations, the very designs of our technology? Look around. You see it, don't you? The threads of the past are still visible, barely noticed, woven into the tapestry of the present. There are still those who speak in symbols. They don't need words. The whispers aren't so loud now, but they're there in the subtle patterns of influence that ripple out through society, quietly shaping the world's direction. It's as if the veil, once lifted, never truly fell back down, but simply shifted, becoming thinner, more transparent, until now it's nearly impossible to tell where the old world ends and the new one begins. It is said that the true power of these societies lies not in what they do, but in what they don't do. In the absence, the silence, the quiet manipulation of events that steer the course of history without ever revealing the hand that guides. It's a dance of influence that has no need for public spectacles, for no grand gestures. A simple, subtle movement of pieces in the game of life, like chess pieces shifting across a vast, unseen board. In the modern age, we are constantly bombarded by information. News cycles spin endlessly, opinions collide, and the world seems to move faster than ever before. But beneath the noise, perhaps there is still a quiet orchestration, a deeper rhythm, one that hums just beneath the surface of the everyday. As the world spins in ever faster circles, those who understand the pulse of history can still hear the faint beat of a drum, one that is not bound by the headlines or the rising and falling of empires. It is a pulse that echoes back to ancient rituals and symbols, and yet moves with the quiet ease of modernity. Take a moment, if you can, to step back and look at the world through different eyes. The global power structures, the alliances that shape nations, the rise and fall of markets and technologies, they're not governed by chance. There is a logic, a pattern, an unseen design. But whose hand moves the pieces? Who ensures the balance and who tips it when the time is right? Some say that the power of these ancient societies has simply blended into the current age. Their rituals have faded, but their goals persist. The quest for knowledge, for influence, for control over the forces that shape civilization. The methods may have evolved, but the core principles remain. The pursuit of hidden truths, the shaping of culture through symbols and narratives, the quiet guidance of those who lead from behind the curtain. These are timeless ambitions. And in an era of digital connectivity, information flows as powerfully as any ritual ever could. But is it just coincidence that the wealthiest families, the most influential corporations, the most powerful individuals all seem to be connected in ways that are difficult to fully understand? A web, not of money, but of influence, spun across the globe like threads connecting distant points on a map. In the glow of our modern screens, we are told that we have access to everything, to the deepest knowledge, the clearest truths. And yet, there are still things hidden from our view, things that don't appear on search engines, things that aren't part of the public discourse. There are still symbols we don't fully understand and rituals we can only guess at. The language of the elite may have shifted, but it hasn't disappeared. It has simply adapted, becoming more subtle, more refined, more integrated into the world we live in. The modern veil is thin, almost translucent, and yet it persists. The names may change, the institutions may evolve, but there are still those who move in the shadows, weaving their quiet influence. And perhaps that is the most powerful aspect of all. The ability to remain unseen, to guide from a distance, to shape the world without ever drawing attention. The knowledge that they do not need to act openly to effect change, that the true power lies not in force, but in the quiet control of information, in the shaping of perception, in the gentle unseen push toward a future of their design. And so, as the night deepens and the stars stretch across the sky, take a moment to reflect on the world around you. The things you know, the things you don't know, the symbols you've seen but never quite understood, the patterns that repeat, the strange coincidences, the quiet moments when it seems like the world is shifting just out of reach. Perhaps it is not by chance. Perhaps it is by design. A design older than we realize, still unfolding, still shaping the world beneath the surface. And as you close your eyes tonight, let the mysteries linger with you, just out of sight, like the stars that hide behind the veil of the dawn. Alright, thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed this journey, like and subscribe and rest easy until our next late night story. Good night.